Volvo has just unveiled the 2025 Volvo EX30, and it is their smallest electric SUV, slotting in between the C40 Recharge and the XC40 Recharge. And I'm a little bit confused about Volvo's design language right now. I'm going to talk more about that when we jump into the design in Photoshop. But first of all, let's have a look at this article from Car and Driver about this new EX30. So, as I said, it's the smallest electric SUV from Volvo, slotting in between the C40 and the XC40, and the pricing starts as $36,145, which sounds like a pretty decent deal, and that's for the base 268 horsepower rear-wheel drive EX30 with a claimed range of 275 miles. Not bad at all. And then there will also be an all-wheel drive dual motor 422 horsepower version later on. In the interior, you do have a single 12.3-inch touchscreen. So just like they say here, this is the exact opposite of the 4-ton beasts such as the GMC Hummer EV and the growing number of electric big trucks. And I think this package is actually what EVs do best right now. If you're gonna have an EV, you want it to be small and as light as possible and just focus on getting the range up to a decent number. And I think that's exactly what Volvo is doing with the EX30. So inside the EX30 is where people can see how Volvo simplified things for the sake of sustainability. Instead of scattering stereo speakers in both the doors, for example, and the dashboard, like most cars, the EX30 comes standard with a full-width soundbar mounted at the base of the windshield. So I think that's what's going on here. I'm interested in learning more how this is more sustainable by having a sound bar instead of separated speakers. Would be interesting to learn more about that. Like the Teslas, the EX30 has a single center mounted display, which we're going to talk more about when we talk about this interior in Photoshop. And there is a single motor rear wheel drive configuration that generates 268 horsepower, 253 pound-feet of torque. The dual motor all-wheel drive variant delivers a combined 422 horsepower and 400 pound-feet of torque. And this is supposed to give this EX30 a 0 to 60 time in 3.4 seconds, which is pretty fast. I mean, we're used to that by now. EVs are, in fact, very quick. It doesn't matter if you get a base model or a dual motor. They're all very quick these days. And as we mentioned before, the single motor gets 275 miles of range, while the extra motor is going to shave 10 miles of that figure, which I think sounds pretty worth it, especially to get all-wheel drive. Peak charging rate of 153 kilowatts, 27 minutes to charge the EX30 from 10 to 80% with this specific DC fast charger. What's cool here is that Volvo will also unveil a sort of outdoorsy version of this, a cross-country treatment for the first time of an EV, and that it looks pretty cool, this thing. And that will happen later in 2024, and it would also have a Swedish flag on the hood. In the press photos, I don't see any Swedish flags on the hood, so I would like to see how that is going to turn out with the graphics in the front end. So the pricing starts at $36,145, which I think, again, it sounds like a pretty decent deal to me, specifically with this styling. So let's jump into Photoshop here and let's have a look at what's going on with this Volvo EX30. Starting with the sort of ideation sketches, but as you know, when it comes to press cars like this and press sketches, these sketches are normally done after the fact that the car has already been designed and almost production ready. But it looks cool still to see the kind of ideas behind this shape. What's interesting here is that this looks like an exact miniature of the EX90, and I don't think that's a bad idea at all. I love the sketches here. You can see how they exaggerate the wheel sizes, and this is what you do as a designer. You want to plant the car properly, and you want to sell the sketch and the proportions of this thing, even though you know that proportions like this is never gonna make it into production. These look like maybe 30-inch wheels or something like that, but very clean surfacing in these sketches. And then it moves down to the more rendered design sketches right here for the front end, and we have some crazy graphics going on in the lower section of this front end. And I do like Volvo's design language right now because, as I've said before, it feels like they managed to mix product design, industrial design, but still have some sort of automotive feel for their designs. And I think that has a lot to do with the front end having a personality and an expression to it. And I also like this new idea or take on the Thor's hammer integrated lights in the front end. Very clean surfacing in the front. The side view, also very nice sketch. I like the sketching techniques that they're using here to make this a very shiny looking surface. We do have two parallel lines here. We're gonna have a look at more of these details when we look at the real car in just a minute. I do like the roof line as well. Have a very sloping line going down here, and the proportions overall in a side view, specifically in this sketch, it looks like a XC40. It looks like this could actually house an internal combustion engine. Now this is where it gets interesting, and I think this is we're gonna see this treatment in a lot of new Volvo models, maybe even their station wagons. Would be interesting to see how they implement this type of graphics that we have in the EX30 here, and also in the EX90 onto a wagon package. I can see it happening, and I think that's what's going to happen with the next V90, for example. Then we have some very cool functional or explanatory sketches down here to show what you can do with the, for example, the center console. This is the rear end of the console, and this is the front end. So you have these cup holders right here, for example, and it looks like they had a lot of fun sketching this out, because you can see how you slide this cup holder out. You also have a phone. You can have a phone holder in the front end, or if you want, you can make them into two cup holders like we have in this sketch. This is a top view of the same area, and you also have some sort of storage compartment in the rear end, which you can slide out for the back seat passengers. And here's a nice little doodle of the door as well. I do like the styling that we have here. Very clean, minimalistic Scandinavian style, even in the interior right here. I just wanted to throw in this sketch down here because I think it's such a cool idea to show an explosion sketch like we have here of, for example, the entire assembly of the headlight with the different layers that goes in to a headlight. You can see that you have all the names for the various layers down there at the bottom. Now let's jump into the real thing and have a look at this design. So in the article they said that this is shorter than a Chevy Bolt, which is hard to believe when you look at these proportions, but it's also wider. So this is a very boxy, cube-like design, and I really like the proportions of this thing. It looks planted coming from factory. I would probably wanna, not sure about these wheels. These are typical EV wheels, as you can see, but let's focus on the front end here. We do have the lines in the hood, and this is where they say that it's gonna put a Swedish flag in the off-road version or the cross-country version. It's going to be interesting. I want to see how that is going to look when that comes out. And then we have these headlights. I don't believe that these are the same split-style headlights that we have in the EX90, where this is separated in the middle, and then it kind of folds down and folds up and revealing the light bulbs behind this. I could be wrong, but I don't see any headlights in here. And I also think that maybe would be a little bit too expensive at this price point. But look at the front end, and what I'm confused by here, as I said in the beginning, is how are Volvo going to separate themselves from Polestar? Because they look so similar and they have the exact same design philosophy across both brands. So this could just as well have been a Polestar to me. But looking at this side view, and this is probably my favorite view of this car because I love the proportions of this thing. We have a very sloping roofline here, sporty looking, that dips down in the very end with the black graphics separating the top of the greenhouse from the rest of the body. And this looks like a very nice modernization or evolution of the area that we have on the XC40, which I think has one of the best looking rear shoulders right above the rear axle. This also looks very, very good. And then you can see the separation of the taillights in the back here. Let me know what you think about this new Volvo treatment, specifically in the back. We're gonna have a look at that in the next image here. But before we do that, have a look at these two parallel lines. This is what I'm talking about when I say that the Volvo is great at mixing industrial design and product design, a bit more static feel in their designs, but they still have, for example, combining these two static lines at the bottom with a very smooth and automotive top section of the car, and I think everything works really well together, and that's not an easy thing to do, to mix two completely different philosophies of design, industrial and automotive. And you can see at the bottom, to reduce some of this weight, you have the battery pack sitting somewhere in this area, and it's also blacked out to reduce the overall visual height of this thing, and of course the black roof also helps with that. I like that we have the cut line for the trunk following the lines of the fender. So you have the same line here as you have up here. I feel like the engineers and the designers worked very closely together here to make it look proper, even with the cut lines all over the car. So here is the rear view. So this is what I'm talking about. Volvo's new design language for the split taillights. I feel like I want to connect them in some way. I want to have a connection here between these two. It would just feel a little bit more natural to have some sort of connection. Maybe even just black this area out like I'm doing right now, because it feels like that's how it should be. But I think this is one of these details that I'm just gonna get used to after a while. After seeing these cars out on the streets, it gotta make a lot more sense. And we don't have a complete light bar going from one end to the other. So maybe that's a trend that's slowly fading after 10 years of being in production in pretty much every single car manufacturers. Beautiful chamfers all around this car, bringing back some of that industrial feel. I do like the design of the fenders here as well. It makes it feel bigger than what it is, adding fenders like this onto this car. Now, talking last but not least about this interior, I'm still pretty split about these type of interiors, if I like them or not. I think it suits to have an interior like this in a package like the EX30, where you have a small, very small electric SUV that is probably just going to be used as commuter cars or city cars. Having interiors like this, in a case like this, it kind of works, and I think this still looks so much better than a very sterile Tesla interior, for example, because you can see that we have different materials. In this example, the steering wheel, it has some nice styling and design to it. Even the middle section here has a nice chamfer going all around it. And these are details that doesn't exist in Teslas. Same thing with these vents here. I'm glad to see that this is just a manually adjustable vent. You just put your finger here, adjust where you want the air to flow out from, and this is exactly what I want to see in a car like this. It doesn't have to be too complicated to just adjust a vent, even though it is a very futuristic looking car on the outside. Overall, I think this interior, it looks pretty neat. You have some different materials here. Looks like some sort of star pattern in a dark sky or something like that, adding some sort of interesting features that you want to look closer at, and that's what I'm looking for. Specifically when everything else is so simplistic in here, add some different materials and textures like I think we have in the EX30. I can't wait to see this in real life, and specifically the cross-country with the Swedish flag on the hood. How are they going to implement that graphics onto the hood of the car? I think it's going to look cool. I can't wait to see it out on the streets.